Can't swatch in store? Finding your perfect foundation match is basically impossible right now. That's why Il Maquillage's online quiz is such a game changer. It finds your perfect match in seconds from the comfort of your own home. And it gets even better. With Try Before You Buy, you can try your full-size shade at home free for 14 days. So convenient in times like these. Take the quiz at ilmaquillage.com/quiz. That's ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
Hey Eagles fans, this is Mike Kaye from NJ Advanced Media. Welcome to the No Huddle Show podcast, where we discuss anything and everything Philadelphia Eagles. You can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, bookmark that, and you can subscribe to our exclusive Eagles text service, where we'll break news, give you insider observations, and provide in-depth analysis. Through Eagles Extra, you can send questions and comments directly to us, and we'll respond to your phone. With me today, as always, is my fellow Eagles beat reporter, Chris Franklin. Today, we're going to discuss the Eagles' latest injury news, the Week 7 roster shuffling, and preview the Thursday night football matchup with the Giants. Chris, how you doing today?
Not too bad, Mike. Not too bad. Finally heading right back into division play, and it's going to be a few make-or-break weeks for this team. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Probably better than Jamon Brown. Just getting ready for another classic Thursday night football division matchup. The Eagles have kind of owned the Giants over the last several years, and I have not covered a Giants win during my career with NJ.com. So there's that. Look, there's a lot of things to talk about here. Let's get them right into them. There's a boatload of injuries, but the Eagles got some good news on Wednesday. We're recording on Wednesday right after the injury report was sent out. Desean Jackson, Avonte Maddox, Lane Johnson, and Duke Riley are all set to return this week against the Giants. Those are some big, additions to the roster. Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Miles Sanders, and Malik Jackson will not play. Those are obviously some big subtractions. Let's kind of get into these. Let's talk about Desean Jackson first. What do you think he can do on a short week after missing 3 weeks of action?
Well, I think especially seeing what we saw last week with John Hightower, and actually his previous weeks with John Hightower with some of those drops, I think he can go ahead and contribute right away. I mean, just imagine if you had Jackson in those situations, I think you basically have two more big plays that go ahead and change the course of a game. So I think it's going to be very important for him to basically his return is going to be important for this offense. And especially with another Zach Ertz out, you gain back another important weapon, and maybe they line up in the slot and he goes ahead and attack the middle of the field like Ertz was supposed to do this year. I mean, I think it's going to be definitely help this offense. I mean, what injury do you think is going to be what player is returning that you think is going to be very impactful for this offense or defense?
Well, I think Lane Johnson returning is huge, especially with Jack Driscoll out with an ankle injury. I think, when Lane Johnson's in there, Carson Wentz is typically successful. And I think having Lane Johnson out there, especially with Boston Scott getting the bulk of the carries in the backfield, Lane Johnson helps on screen passes. He's going to help going against those pass rushers of the Giants. I think he'll match up pretty regularly with Marcus Golden. I think there's going to be a key matchup there. And I just think he makes the offensive line better. Look, 2 starters on the offensive line are better than 1, especially when you consider the fact that, like we alluded to earlier, Jamon Brown, their starting right guard from week 6, has already been released. Matt Pryor's still on the COVID-19 list. So it probably means that Nate Herbig's going to move back to right guard. I like the way that group looked in week 2 against the Rams. Then you've probably got Sua Opeta starting on the left side next to Jordan Mailata. So the Eagles will have their 6th different set of offensive linemen in 7 games. That's hard to overcome, but with Lane Johnson back there, it's an upgrade as opposed to a detriment. Let's talk about which injury is going to hurt them the most, the injury absence. What do you got?
That's going to be tough. I think right now, Malik Jackson. If I had to look at a guy who was actually, I thought was playing at a very high level in the middle of that defense. I mean, Fletcher Cox is obviously going to draw a lot of double teams, and you hope that the other tackle who's going to be playing alongside him is going to be able to go ahead and attack the offensive line, especially in the interior. And I think Jackson was doing that so far this season. And basically, if you're a quarterback and you see all that pressure coming inside, and if it basically goes ahead and forces you to go ahead and throw that ball quicker, you start getting a little antsy. You can't step up in the pocket, and that's what Jackson was able to do. And dare I say it, he was actually one of the ones that few linemen that were getting their hands up at times too, which this defensive line did a lot more. And they started to do a lot more last week. But Jackson's loss, I think, is going to be felt. It's going to be a big spot for Javon Hargrave to step in there. I mean, he was the big free agent signing this past year, and he's going to have to go ahead and prove it, especially against an offensive line. I think he has a chance to do it against this Giants offensive line, and he's going to have to go out there and prove it. I mean, who do you think is going to be able to hurt? Whose loss do you think is going to hurt the most?
Well, I think Miles Sanders. You look at this, he's coming off back-to-back games with 74-yard runs that have led to touchdowns, even for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So he's a guy that, look, I believe he's like 13th in the league in carries, but he's 4th in the league in rushing yards. Like, despite what everybody has said about his injury status and fighting, battling his way through injuries, I think he's had a pretty good season despite the injury woes. He's a guy that is their biggest big play threat, in my opinion, and losing him is going to hurt. But then again, you have Desean Jackson back. I like what you're seeing from Jalen Hurts as a runner. And then Boston Scott has had his 2 best games of his career against the Giants. He's Boston Scott in the Giant Beanstalk. Like, he's, the Boston TD party. So I think when I look at that, plus they're going to be wearing black on black in this game, which is a uniform combination that they've been very successful in. Seems like kind of a desperation move, as our buddy Seamus Clancy from NBC Sports kind of alluded to earlier today. But let's talk about the roster shuffling. So obviously with all these injuries, we're going to see some guys get elevated. We already saw Jamon Brown get cut to make room for tight end Jason Kroom, who came off the practice squad last week and scored a touchdown in his only play on offense. And then, you've got Richard Rodgers starting at tight end as well. I would imagine that they're going to elevate T.Y. McGill from the practice squad and either Prince Tega-Wanagu to give them a little bit more offensive line support, or I could see them kind of, with Avonte Maddox back in place and Marcus Epps able to play. I don't think you're going to see Braylon Arnold. I don't think you're going to see Elijah Riley, but I think you could see somebody like, Adrian Killins or even maybe Elijah Holyfield getting the bump up. They haven't shown a lot of faith in playing Jason Huntley. I wonder if they feel like they need a ground and pound guy like Elijah Holyfield or a guy who was here this summer in Adrian Killins. What do you think they should do?
Well, it's funny you mentioned Holyfield, because remember, everybody was oohing and awing this past training camp when he was making these big runs. He was making these physical runs. He was jawing back and forth with the defense, and it seems like he got lost in the shuffle even in his own practice squad. I mean, we were talking about Adrian Killins before we were talking about Elijah Holyfield, and I think especially with the way the running back room is right now, with how it's currently constructed with Sanders out, you're going to need a guy like that to get these tough yardage, especially if they're up in the fourth quarter. You're going to need that physical element that's going to be there. And I think when it comes to the Kroom being added to the active roster, I think it's more of an indictment of Hakeem Butler is nowhere near ready to go ahead and be like that second tight end on that offense. I mean, the former wide receiver, you think, especially in a game like this, you want somebody to go ahead in hands, especially being down some impact players. So you would think Butler would have been ready to go, but obviously not. So Kroom's going to step in there, Mr. Efficiency, 1 snap, 1 touchdown. So it won't be the same clip, but who knows? Maybe between the combination of Rodgers and Kroom can actually be fruitful for this offense.
I watched Hakeem Butler run down on kickoff returns and punt returns this past week. I've never seen a person look more lost on special teams in my life. So would not be shocked if he's inactive in this game. Look, the Eagles now with Desean Jackson will have quite a few wide receivers to play with. Desean Jackson, Travis Fulgham, John Hightower, Quez Watkins, Greg Ward, and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. That's 6 guys. I think all 6 will be active. How are you splitting up the reps? Who's starting? What's your thought process on that?
Well, I think probably not right now. I'd probably start Jackson. I charge Jackson and Fulgham. I think Fulgham has definitely earned the start. And if you went to a third receiver, if they will start out with 11 personnel, meaning running back and one tight end, you put Ward in the slot. I think you just have to do that. I think you slowly work in Hightower a little bit to give Jackson reps because you don't want to go ahead and burn him out, especially being that he hasn't played that much. So you want to go ahead and throw him out. I think you throw him out there to go ahead and get some of those reps. Whiteside, I think he's toward the back end of that group. He's not getting, in my estimation, I don't think he's getting that many snaps on there. And I think Quez Watkins, I mean, I really haven't seen anything coming out from him when he's been on the field, which kind of was a disappointment. I thought maybe he was going to be the wide receiver out of the ones that were picked up in the lower rounds. I thought he would have been the one that was going to flash some stuff, but he hasn't done it so far. I mean, how would you, if you were the general manager or you were Doug Peterson saying, hey, you know what, I want to go ahead and divvy up these reps, how would you have it?
I would probably say that something similar. Look, I think you've got to rotate Desean Jackson and John Hightower. Hightower's gotten used to playing a lot of snaps. He's bigger than Desean, and not as fast, but he's shown the ability to get downfield. I think he's a Z receiver. I think that's what he is. You're not going to have him play a lot against press. I think Fulgham needs to play, 90% of the snaps here. So you're going to have him at the X receiver spot. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside will back him up. And then, in the slot, I guess you have Ward and Quez Watkins. Look, I agree with you. I haven't been impressed by Quez Watkins. I mean, he's only really had like 4 or 5 snaps in 2 games. But realistically, I just, if there is a guy who's inactive, it'll be Quez Watkins. He does almost the same thing that John Hightower and Desean Jackson do on paper, just not as well. So
what? I have a quick question. Here we go. Would you rather go with Watkins or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside long term?
If I'm Howie Roseman, I've invested in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. I think he's shown very good effort. Quez Watkins does almost exactly the same thing as Desean Jackson, John Hightower, and Jalen Reagor. Or at least that's what he's most proficient at. So to me, I mean, look, I'm not cutting J.J. Arcega-Whiteside just to cut J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. It's been a year and a half. Like, I get it. There's no scholarship anymore, but it's not like he's completely inept. Yes. Has he been bad? Of course. Is he a bust? Yes. But eventually you have to see who can be out there and block. What's the health status of Alshon Jeffrey? They need a backup X receiver. Fulgham is one hit away from somebody else going in there. And I don't know if Alshon Jeffrey's ever going to be a full-time player for the Eagles this season. So, I do know that you have like 16 Z receivers, and Quez Watkins is at the bottom of the barrel. I also think you can get him through waivers pretty easily. He hasn't really done anything to show that he's a must-add for a team. He's not a pass rusher like Casey Hill. He's not an offensive tackle. He's not a tight end, There's a shortage of good players at those positions. There aren't really at wide receiver, as you see with Travis Fulgham. So, I would go with JJ, at least for the foreseeable future. With that said, when we look at this matchup with the Giants, these are 2 of the most turnover-prone quarterbacks in the league. Carson Wentz is tied for the league lead with Kirk Cousins with 11 turnovers, 2 fumbles lost, 9 interceptions. And then you've got Daniel Jones, who has turned the ball over, I believe, in all but 1 game that he started in. Not good. There are going to be turnovers in this game, and the Eagles' only win of the season has been when they won the turnover battle against San Francisco. So, look, the Eagles have dominated the Giants. I believe they won 11 of the last 12 matchups in the series. And the Giants have not won a Thursday night football game since 2015. Everything's coming up Eagles from a trend standpoint. Are you concerned at all about this Giants team who just scored their first win of the season barely against the Redskins, who actually beat the Eagles in week 1? Where are you at with this Giants team? Where are you at with their comparison to the Eagles?
Well, right now, I mean, everything on paper says it's heavily Eagles, but there's 3 things I'm actually a little worried about. One, this team. One thing I will say, the Giants don't don't just quit. It seems like they're always that team. They like to linger around for a quarter or a half or what have you. And those can be the most dangerous team because the Eagles give a turnover and next thing you know, Giants go up quick. They start thinking, hey, you know what? We're in this game. Two, I think when you look at the shuffling that they have against this makeshift offensive line again, coming up on a short week, I'm actually concerned about Leonard Williams going against Sua Opeta and Jordan Mailata over there on the left side, the Eagles left side of the line, but the Giants right side of the line. I think he can actually create a few problems if it gets to that. So I think that's going to be something to watch out with. And if they start to get some pressure on that side and Wentz starts to go ahead and start rolling, having to roll out and bail out quickly, I think that could be an issue to do it. But three is that you look at this division right now, I think everybody legitimately feels they have a shot. Even Washington think they have a shot to compete for it and maybe headed to the playoffs at the end of the season. So as long as the team's in it, and especially with everything the way it is right now, I think that they're going to go ahead. I think they're going to play a spirited match, be it it's going to be nationally televised, it's a division game, and that you're going to have everything that's on the line right now, even this early in the season. I mean, do you feel like this is this going to be basically a troubling game for the Eagles? Do you feel that way?
No, I don't think it's going to be a troubling game for the Eagles. I think it'll be a lot closer than a lot of pundits kind of think it will. We'll get to our predictions later on, but I think James Bradberry creates an issue for Travis Fulgham as well as he's played against the likes of Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters and Joe Hayden. But I do think he'll get open. I think there's trust between him and Carson Wentz. I think his ability to high point the football is pretty spectacular for a guy who's come out of nowhere. I don't think their linebackers are very good. I don't think their pass rushers are very good. What else you got? Yeah, I mean, Leonard Williams could be a problem. But I think this offensive line is significant, as banged up as this offensive line has been. I still think it's better than the Giants' offensive line. And I really like the Eagles' pass rush against this offensive line. The Giants are having a lot of struggles on the outside blocking for Daniel Jones, who is a fumbling machine. I think that's really good news for a guy like Brandon Graham, a guy like Josh Sweat. I think Fletcher Cox is really going to be able to attack them up the middle as well. And then, obviously the running game is a concern. They're going to have to establish the running game early. Boston Scott's going to have to play well. They're going to have to establish the screen game. Corey Clement's going to actually have to do something on offense. Look, they're going to have to use Jalen Hurts pretty often. And I will say one of my big predictions for this game is Jalen Hurts scores his first touchdown of his career on the ground. I think they're going to use him heavily in the red zone. It's something that they need to do. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 quarterback sets. And I think Carson Wentz is someone who embraced those kind of looks because, frankly, they need to get stuff going. I was harsh on Carson Wentz, went back, watched the tape. I was harsh on Carson Wentz. I still think he was pretty uneven. I still think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think some of those sacks and hits were on him last week. That said, the fourth quarter was very, very promising. I really like what he did against the Steelers as well. If Carson didn't get the ball out quickly, I expect them to run a lot of 10 and 11 personnel. So 10 personnel would be 1 running back, no tight ends. 11 personnel would be 1 running back, 1 tight end. They're not going to have a lot of depth here at the tight end position. Plus, Richard Rodgers is not a very good blocker. So I think you'll see a lot of 4 wide receiver sets in this game. And I think that's smart. I think having Greg Ward and Desean Jackson in the slot with Hightower and Fulgham on the outside, or Fulgham in the slot with Jackson outside and Hightower outside, that's a winning combination because you got that speed on the outside and then you got the 2 surest-handed receivers on the team going across the middle. I think that's a good strategy to win with. Outside of Bradberry, their secondary is awful. Logan Ryan can be picked on from a size standpoint if you can get Richard Rodgers on him. Richard Rodgers is a really good athlete. And look, I think this team is going to go as Carson goes, and Carson should have a good time picking on other dudes. I think Desean Jackson returning, I think Hightower kind of getting his feet back under him with that 50-yard catch is big. Look, these guys are going to have to catch the footballs. They're going to have to make plays for Carson Wentz because Fulgham's going to have, probably one of his least eventful nights against Bradberry.
And it's funny you mentioned 10 and 11 personnel. I think I see this as possibly a game that Carson Wentz throws the ball 40, 45 times.
I
Reason
agree.
being, especially with remember first game of the year against Washington, the Eagles backs had trouble when it came to the pass blocking, and they also had trouble trying to gain yards on the ground. So one of the ways you can do that is not only doing the screens, but you see a lot of slants, you see a lot of hitches, you see a lot of those quick outs, and especially with these receivers with the speed that they have. I wouldn't be surprised to see start to see Desean Jackson running those little 5-7 yard sideline routes going out. It's about as good as like running a 5 yard zone stretch play. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see Fulgham just running 10 yard stops and everything. And that will go ahead. You chain a bunch of those catches down line. They're able to go ahead and make those catches. Those can be as good as run. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go ahead and try to utilize the short passing game in order to supplement the potential issues at running the football.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at this group as a whole, like, you're going to have to get him on the move. You're going to have to get Carson Wentz on the move. You want to see him run. You want to see him take advantage of these linebackers. You want to see him take advantage of this minimal pass rush. And look, if you can do some, draw plays, I think they'll work relatively well. They worked against the Ravens with Miles Sanders. They worked against the Steelers with Miles Sanders. You're just going to have to be creative. And look, the Giants are very good at disguising coverage and disguising blitzes. That's going to confuse Carson Wentz at times. There are going to be mistakes made. Carson finally didn't throw an interception this past game. I would probably bet that he throws an interception in this one or has a turnover. So look, I think this Eagles team needs to be disciplined. They can't get dumb penalties. They need to take advantage of beating a bad team in their division in order to kind of get this thing going. We all think that they're the favorites to win this division, except for maybe the Giants. And, the ball's really in their court. You saw how terrible Dallas was on Monday night. Washington couldn't beat them. There's a lot of chaos going on in Washington's offense. The Giants are whatever. Their offensive line is horrific. The real basis of the Eagles' problems is linebacker, running back, and, getting healthy. And if those are the biggest issues, well, that's the way the Eagles have put placement on their roster. Looking a little bit ahead to the trade deadline, we're not going to get too much into the Giants game. We haven't had enough time to really study them as much as we wanted to just because it's a short week. But here, hold on. Before we get into the trade deadline, what's your prediction for this game?
I think the Eagles, I think it's going to be, I think I had the Eagles 31-16. I think they do I think this is going to be Carson Wentz's best game of the season. I really feel that. Even being as hit as much as he was last week, I think he's going to bounce back and he's going to will this. I think the offense is going to have its best output, especially against this Giants defense. And the only thing I would say is I hope that they don't look ahead toward the Cowboys. I hope it's not one of those things, and they're not in a position to look ahead against everybody. But I just wonder if it's one of those things where they start to look ahead. But I think Peterson will go ahead and have them focused on this game, and they'll take advantage of it on a short week. How about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I have it as a 14-10 halftime score.
Oh wow!
I think it'll be closer, and then I think the Eagles pull ahead. And end up winning 24-20. I think it's going to be closer. I think this is one of those ones where you're going to say, look, it's a good enough win against a bad team, but I don't think they're going to blow them out. I do think the Cowboys next week's going to be very interesting because I think then the Eagles will be starting to feel themselves and maybe start to build momentum. It's always the Giants always seem to play the Eagles close and just can't finish. So I think that's kind of what you're going to see in this game. Let's move on a little bit to the trade deadline because it's sneaking up. It's less than 2 weeks away. There have been two conflicting reports. So first, CBS Sports reporter Jason Lockenfora, who has a history of kind of swinging and missing when it comes to the Eagles, reported that GM Howie Roseman's expected to be aggressive at the trade deadline. That plays into his history. If you look at his history as general manager in both stints, he's only made 4 player trades with incumbent talent, so like trading players on the Eagles roster in the middle of the season, and only one of those has been for just draft picks. The other ones, he swapped players. So I'm inclined to believe that Howie's going to be aggressive just because they have this window to get back to the NFC East. This team always thinks in the way of win the division. There hasn't been a repeat NFC East winner, I believe, in over a decade. So that's something else to put on Howie's mantle, on Doug's mantle. It does help their job positioning and their outlook and whatever. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, nobody's going to be like Doug Peterson when his career's said and done. He won 10 division titles, but one of them was at 6-9 and whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to happen. So I think they want to get to the dance. I don't think this team's good enough to compete. I don't think they should be making trades for players. But when you look at what their whole situation is, there are some logical moves to make. That said, Adam Schefter from ESPN said on 97.5 The Fanatic this morning that he expects the Eagles to be more sellers than buyers. Where do you think they should go with the trade deadline? Should they stay put? Should they sell? Should they buy?
I think for the most part, I think they should stand pat unless there is a trade that's available where you pretty much get like for like contracts and you don't have to take on any additional salary. I think they should stand pat. And the reason why I say that is they're going to, even this, as they announced today, the Eagles restructured Fletcher Cox's contract in order to free up $5 million in cap room. And the Eagles are going to have to try to roll over as much cap room as they possibly can, because right now it looks like they're standing pat according to Over the Cap. They're standing pat right now they're looking at $67 million in over the cap in 2021, which is insane. So they need to roll over as much money as they can in order to get that. And also, I wouldn't start trading draft picks because you're going to need the those lower numbers to go ahead and help out when it comes to acquiring players. You're not going to sign. You probably won't sign any big name free agents next year with this, given this cap situation. So unless they can make a player for player trade and somehow acquire maybe another linebacker, I don't think. Well, we all know the situation. A receiver wouldn't do that. Maybe even a reserve running back. If I mean the name Jordan Howard, people saying, hey, let's get Jordan Howard. Let's get Jordan Howard. I mean, it's nice and all right now if you can, but unless you can give away, unless you have to somebody you can give away with the same type of contract value wise, I'd probably say you stand pat at this point and not take on any additional money. Now, what would you do? Would you go ahead and try to increase get more people in here to go ahead and help out?
Well, the only position I would trade for is linebacker, and I would only do it if a guy was on a rookie contract or in the final year of his deal. There are three guys that are kind of in that situation that I kind of think makes sense. There's Avery Williamson, who has a $2.75 million base salary and a per game bonus, but both of those would be prorated at this point. I think he'd probably cost you 1.75 at this point. That's not a lot. They did just get some more cap space from renegotiating Fletcher Cox's deal. He's a veteran linebacker. He fits their kind of mold of a 6'1", 230-pound linebacker who can move in space and play in coverage. He's very smart. He's played in the league for 7 years. He knows what it's like to play middle linebacker. Obviously, he's with the Jets, so you have the Joe Douglas dynamic. And they just traded Stephen McClendon basically after their blowout loss to the Dolphins. So there's going to be a fire sale there. It appears. I think you could probably get him for a 6th or 7th round pick. The Eagles are expected to get 3 compensatory picks next year, 1 6th and 2 7ths. So you would get that replenishment back. They also have 2 5th round picks this year, no 4th round pick, but overall they have 7 draft picks coming into the offseason with 3 potential compensatory picks coming their way. So I don't think it's that damning to have nine picks. And as we saw with Howie Roseman during day 3 of this past draft, he knows how to turn late round picks into more late round picks. So I'm not a fan of trading for guys, but I think Avery Williamson can be a Will Witherspoon-esque like trade. If you remember during the Andy Reid era, they traded for Will Witherspoon. He had a great first game and kind of added to that linebacker group. And I believe they made the playoffs off that. So that would make sense to me. But I think if you're going to swing, you've got to swing smart, and Williamson would make sense. Another Jets linebacker, Novell Hewitt, makes a little bit of sense. He's a veteran guy. He's a guy I liked in free agency. They went with Jatavis Brown instead, and Jatavis Brown obviously retired. And then Anthony Walker from the Colts, he's on the final year of his rookie deal. Not having a great year there, but maybe a change of scenery can do him wonders. He can play middle linebacker. He's got good measurables, and he's young. So maybe you give him a test out for the final 9 to 10 games of the season, or 8 to 9 games of the season, and see what you got there. But yeah, so we're both on the same kind of radar with standing pat for the most part. I don't think you can trade Zach Ertz at this point with that high ankle sprain. He's having a down year. I would just wait for the off season. What are your final thoughts, Chris, as we kind of roll into Thursday?
I think this week's going to be a big test, I think, for his coaching staff when it comes to even creativity and what we've seen. It seems like we've seen the same thing over and over again on offense. You haven't seen, besides the 2 quarterback system thing, we haven't seen like the creative, innovative designs that you see. And I think this is a perfect week to go ahead and do that, especially if you go ahead and put some stuff on tape to go ahead and get some of these upcoming opponents, give them something to think about. So I want to see how this coaching staff gets ready on a short week to go ahead and prepare this team and go ahead and try to find ways to give some of these opposing defenses and offenses some fits and stuff to keep them up at night, because it's been lacking a little bit. But I think now is the time to go ahead and start stacking some of those games in those plays in order for it to happen. So it's going to be real interesting to see what this team does on Thursday.
Yeah, I agree. So remember, you can sign up for Eagles Extra, NJ.com/text. You can download the No Huddle Show podcast wherever podcasts are available. We will have another episode on Friday recapping the Eagles' Week 7 matchup against the Giants. So we'll talk to you then. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for listening to the No Huddle Show podcast.
Acast powers some of the world's best podcasts. Here's a show we recommend.
I'm Sonia Pfeiffer, award-winning journalist and criminal defense attorney.
I'm David Rudolph. I represented Michael Peterson in the murder trial that became the Netflix documentary The Staircase. Abuse of Power is an original podcast that examines the impact of wrongful convictions.
We will reveal the frightening ways in which innocent people can find themselves wrongfully convicted, imprisoned, and even executed. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Acast recommends.